Megan Cornwell is the deputy editor of Premier Christianity magazine, and a blog article I shared on my Unbelievable Facebook page this last week was one of the most widely read articles, and probably on our whole website actually, of the last week, because it told her story of effectively surviving coronavirus. It was pretty nasty experience by all accounts, and she's got some amazing things to say on the back of it as well. Megan, thank you very much for making time to join me today.
Thanks for having me, Justin.
We're friends, we're colleagues, so when I heard you were sick, well, certainly towards the tail end of it, we were in touch, and I've been praying for you, but I didn't really realize the magnitude of what you'd gone through until I read your blog, which is titled, and it's available now over on the Premier Christianity website, From Death to Life, How God Delivered Me from Coronavirus. So take us back to, I guess you, along with everyone else, were working from home and doing the sort of, following government guidelines thing. But just about how long ago did you start yourself to feel ill?
So it would have been Tuesday 2 weeks ago was when I first had a tiny bit of a cough. I just got back from a weekend with my sister away. We'd been to a spa, and I just started getting a bit of a cough, and I thought, oh, you're hearing all this stuff in the news and you're thinking, that's a bit odd, this is a new cough, but I've been to a spa, and I could have picked it up anywhere, it's just a cough. So that's what it started with. You can probably still hear a bit of the breathlessness, but yeah, and then it just kind of progressed from there, really. I started to get a tight chest, and again I was like, oh, it's just anxiety. There's a lot going on, and I'm just, this is unprecedented, we're in a pandemic, of course I'm going to be anxious. So I kind of put it down to that. My husband kept saying, oh, stop being silly, you're just anxious.
Typical husband.
I know I'm going to be holding this one over him for a while. I have played the I nearly died card quite a few times already. But yeah, so then it just sort of got worse. It kind of wasn't getting any better. That's all I can say. Over about I would say 4 or 5 days, to the point where I was like, oh, this is a bit weird. And then I got a few other symptoms, and that was when I called 111, and they said, look, it sounds like you've got it. So the doctor was really helpful, and she said, look, I think day 1 was where you developed the cough on the Tuesday, so you need to self-isolate from now. So that was when I started going into the spare room, and just keeping away from my daughter, because I've got a 3-year-old, so she's very little, and I was worried about her. So I went into the spare room. They didn't see me at all, closed the door, brought all my meals up to me, and then it just got worse from there, basically, before it got better.
Yeah, well, I mean, you describe in some detail just how bad it got, and I think a lot of people have heard, oh, it just affects the vulnerable, the elderly, young people, they don't really feel it's just like getting a cold. Certainly wasn't the case with you, so just explain what it was that you experienced.
So yeah, I've heard this a lot, like people saying it's just like the flu, and I just cannot be more insistent upon this. I've had the flu 3 times before in my life, where I've been in bed for 2 weeks, and yeah, it's bad, but it is nothing like this. Not only in terms of severity, but in terms of the symptoms, it's nothing like it. I didn't have a stuffy nose. I wasn't sleepy, in the same way that I have been with flu before. I literally couldn't breathe, and it would go up and down in waves. So sometimes I'd feel a lot better in the day, and then by the night I'd start feeling awful again and struggling to breathe. And I think the worst symptom of it all was just this crushing pain in my chest. It was, the only way I can describe it is, it was like something like the virus had burrowed so deep into the wall of my chest, that it was just like aching, and it just felt, it was like nothing I've ever experienced before. And that was what worried me the most, because I was thinking, what on earth is this, and how is it ever going to get out, because it's so deep in there.
And what were you doing in terms of medical advice at this point, and who were you ringing, and what advice were you being given?
So it's really hard, because obviously the NHS is under extreme pressure. So I called 111 about 3 or 4 times over the course of 3 days when it was at its worst. And effectively the advice is the same every time. It's, look, you can breathe still. So stay where you are, you know, and drink as much as you, my advice for other people going through this is drink as much as you can, absolutely mainline vitamin C, drink as much mint tea as you can, because that's full of anti-inflammatories. That's what I did. I just drank loads of mint tea, loads of vitamin C. I ate well because my husband was cooking for me. Tried to rest when I could, although that's very difficult because you can't really sleep. And just try and stay calm. I think that's the hardest bit, because you're trying to breathe. Sorry, I just have to keep taking big breaths.
Of course, yeah. But just take your time, Megan. Don't feel in any need to get this out quickly, all right?
Thanks. Because you're trying to breathe, it's very and you're anxious, it's very difficult. So I think, you know, staying calm, trying to remember that the stats are in your favor, you know, is always helpful, but that's all you can do, because the reality is that they're not going to take you into the hospital until you're gasping, until you're going like this. And I wasn't at that stage. I was still able to take big breaths into my lungs.
But that is a sign of where we're at, that the kind of symptoms that would have, obviously you would have said, come straight in, come into A&E, get some. At this point, they're saying only when you get to this critical stage are we saying for you to actually go to hospital. And that's frightening in a way. How did you deal with the fear? I mean, did you feel able to pray? Very often when you're physically unwell, it's hard to kind of do that anyway, isn't it?
So I think what's important to say is that before I started to get better and before I started to feel hope, I was in a very, very dark place. I think, you know, from the blog, you probably get a sense of that there. But I mean, I didn't go into the depths of what it was like. But to be honest, Justin, like there were moments where I literally thought that the three of us in this house were going to come out in body bags. Like that is the reality. Oh my goodness. It was so bad, because I was so unwell and I could hear my husband downstairs coughing, and all I was thinking was, oh my gosh, he's a couple of days behind me. I'm going to be hospitalized. He's going to be hospitalized. What's going to happen to our daughter? I was sending frantic emails to my family with contingency plans of like what we were going to do and who was going to come and get Miriam, because they couldn't, the grandparents can't come because they're too old. They can't be exposed. You know, it was absolutely like the most harrowing, dire experience of my life. And I've been hijacked in a game park in Kenya. So, you know,
you've had harrowing experiences to compare it against. Yeah, I remember that story you told me.
I was really thinking God would just, you know, stop.
I know. I was thinking when I got the story through, when you were telling me about it, I thought, and that's Megan, who was up a tree in a game park with lions prowling around not that long ago. Anyway, that's another story for another blog. I mean, okay, so it got really bad, and you had a fever as well through this. And kind of, but you do say that there kind of came a turning point for you, and it felt like a God moment as well. To just talk us through that.
Yeah. So basically, I was up in my room. I had my phone with me, and I was messaging all of my Christian friends, absolutely everybody that I knew, saying, "Pray for us. We need a miracle. You know." Please, like, and I'd kind of keep them updated at every moment to say, right, this is happening now, pray specifically for this is happening now, pray specifically for that. And then I think it was the morning after one of my very, very bad nights, a really very dear friend of mine sent me a link to a song that she'd said she'd been praying over us as a family. I never heard it before, but it's a really beautiful song. It's called The Blessing by Carrie Joby, and I don't know if I'm saying their names right, but Carrie Job and Cody Carnes.
Okay.
And the lyrics are, Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Lord, turn his face towards you and give you peace.
Which is the classic blessing, the Aaronic blessing, yes. But yeah, carry on, yeah.
And then there was this line, and it was this in particular that started to kind of bring hope to me. So it says, may his favor be upon you and 1,000 generations, and your family and your children and their children and their children. And it was in that moment when I was listening to this song and letting it kind of wash over me, I was like, do you know what? We're not going to be brought out in body bags. God is with us, you know, God is with us. And he's going to be there for my children, and he's going to be there for my children's children. And it just started to like birth hope in me again. And and that was the start of it. So I'd been kind of praying, not a sort of tentatively, like before that, not, you know, without that much zealous kind of fervor, because I was kind of like, I'll be all right, you know, I'm 34, this will be fine. I'll say a few prayers to God, you know, just to cover me, just in case. but you know, I'm going to be all right. But then when it got really bad, you know, I started to pray much more seriously, and yeah, it was that song really. That was the beginning. It was like, okay, God's not going to forsake us. He's not going to let this awful thing happen to us. You know, he's with us. He's with my children. He's going to bless me. He's going to bless our family. And so I started to just feel hope again. And that was the beginning of it. And then I think it's really hard to remember exactly what happened, but I think the next day after I started to feel hope was when I had that terrible battle that was on my hands. And it was almost as if I felt slightly better, and it was almost as if you know, my body had kind of fought the virus a little bit, and then I could feel the virus just kicking back at me, and it was like waves and waves of heat, and that's when my temperature soared, and I could just feel this battle going on in my body. And then that was when I was praying, like I was getting really Pentecostal. I was like, I'm declaring victory. Well, I was saying this in my head because I couldn't really speak, but I was saying, I'm declaring victory. This is, you know, I was saying, like, this is, this body is Jesus's, you know, there is no place for evil here. And I'm, you know, I was willing my like antibodies on and just really like going for it.
Yeah. Wow. What I think you described in the blog, almost hearing a voice almost at one point in that. So just tell us about that.
Yeah, that was a really interesting one. And I've kind of reflected on that because I can't say for sure if it wasn't like an audible voice. It wasn't like I could say, oh, I heard the voice of God. It was nothing like that. But it was just a kind of instinctive feeling, like when I was at so there was this moment when I was just describing to you about the surges and the waves that were coming over me. It kind of got to this climactic point where I was absolutely boiling and covered in sweat, even though I was in so many different layers. And I just wanted to take off the layers because I was so hot. And I was about to do that, and I just felt in myself, it must have been God, because I don't know what it was, but it went against everything that my body wanted. And I just felt, no, I need to keep these clothes on, I need to keep warm. And reflecting back now, I honestly think that if I had not listened to that, I would have got pneumonia, because I think that was the moment that was almost like the crunch point, because we know with this virus that it attacks your kind of windpipe, and then it goes down into your lungs. And I think the virus only got as far as my windpipe, but at that moment I do believe it would have gone into my lungs had I not listened to that voice and stayed warm.
It's an amazing story, Megan. I can imagine some skeptics though saying, hey, natural processes happen, and thank goodness you did recover, but that's your body doing what you're kind of evolved to do, basically. What makes you convinced that actually, no, God was part of this as well?
I think it's a really good question, because it's something that I asked myself. The day after I kind of had that really, really bad moment, and then I started to feel a little bit better, and I was thinking, you know, what was that? You know, did I really come close? You know, was it really bad? Was I nearly hospitalized? Did God help me? You know, I was asking all of those questions. How serious was it? And then for me, one thing that was just kind of concluded it for me really was it was getting towards the evening, and I was feeling anxious because the evening had been really bad the previous night. So I was expecting night sweats and my fever to go up again, and for maybe some of the surges to come back, and in fact they had started to come back again, a bit lower level. So I was a bit anxious about what the night could bring. And I was kind of looking around on my bed for my Bible, because my friend had sent me some suggestions of Psalms to read. And I went to grab my Bible and look up this Psalms, and I noticed it was already open. And so I picked it up. This is it here. Got my little Bible here. It's
very
all
good.
Completely tattered.
Well, you know what they say about a Bible that's falling apart usually belongs to someone who isn't.
Not anymore, anyway. But yeah, I opened the Bible and it just, I went to look for the psalm, and it kind of, I sort of stopped in my tracks, because the subheading on the first page, as you look at it, so the left hand page at the top, is Hezekiah's illness, and that's what it said. And I thought, isn't that bizarre? So it kind of grabbed my attention, and I read the passage, and I just completely dumbfounded, because the passage is all about King Hezekiah, who was a noble king, who ruled Judah, and many years ago. And basically he falls ill, and he's near death's door, and Isaiah comes to tell him that he's going to die, the prophet Isaiah. And he's going to die, and he needs to get his house in order. And so Hezekiah weeps and prays and asks God to hear his prayers for deliverance, basically. And then Isaiah comes back and says, God's heard your prayers, and he's going to save you, and he's going to heal you. And then it says, in 3 days you will be at the temple praising God, basically thanking God for your healing. And I was utterly struck by this, because I just thought, what are the chances that I would pick up the Bible and it would be in a book I don't ever remember reading before, that is a situation completely relevant to my situation? And not only that, it kind of answers that question that I had about, was it God, and was I near death? So for me, that was the kind of, in God's mercy, really, he answered that question, and he was able to say, yes, I have done a miracle. Yes, I have heard your prayers. I mean, the bit I'm still asking God about is because in this passage in the Bible, it says God gave Hezekiah back 15 years. So I'm sort of, still in dialogue with God about that one.
Well, look, I'm sure there are many more years on the cards for you than that, Megan. But another, if I may throw another sort of toughie at you, which, was being asked in the comments, especially in my Unbelievable Facebook page after I posted your blog, was, okay, Megan believes God brought her through this. What about the people who don't get through it? Where's God in that situation? So I don't know, what's your kind of response to that kind of question?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really difficult one. And I would in no way want anyone to think that I believe that because you're a Christian, that you're going to get healed from something like this. I think I want to make that really clear. And there were moments when I was in my darkest hour, when I was praying, and I was thinking, there's a possibility that God isn't going to answer this prayer. And there's a possibility that his answer is going to be, no, I'm not going to give you life back. And that was difficult. But at the same time, if God had not given me my life back, would that make him any less merciful? Would that make him any less powerful? Would that make him any less kind? I don't believe so. And I'm so utterly grateful that he did hear my prayer and gave me my life back. But I think God is in the business of saving. And by that, I mean, God is in the business of saving our souls. And I think that is what is more important. I think that's one thing to mention. So throughout this whole thing, even when I thought there was a possibility that God would say no, I knew that I had an assurance that I would be with him, and that I'd be going to a better place. I think that's important to say. I think also it's important to say that we don't know the plans of God, and I don't have any clever theological framework for any of these answers, but I can only tell you what I believe and what I think. And I think there will be there will be many Christians that die from this. You're not inoculated from coronavirus because you're a Christian. I wasn't saved because I'm a better Christian than other people, or because I'm more faithful, or because God loves me more. None of those things. We don't know his ways. We don't know why he saves some people and why he doesn't. All I believe that he's a merciful God. And I think that sometimes that mercy looks different for different people.
Look, thank you so much for the opportunity to get you on air and on video to talk this through. I appreciate you're still in recovery mode, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, Megan, but any advice for anyone who might be feeling fearful, you having gone through that valley of death? What's your advice to someone who may or may not be suffering the effects of coronavirus, but is nevertheless anxious, fearful about what could happen in the future as this pandemic progresses?
Is this for Christians or non-Christians, Justin?
Christians, but if you've got some advice for non-Christians, feel free to offer it as well.
So for Christians, I would say get on your knees. You know, I cannot stress it enough. There are people who need our prayers. There are people who need the mercy of God, you know, and we need to be on our knees. We know the truth. We know we know the spiritual truths. We need to be on our knees, praying for the mercy of God to break in as he's broken into my life, to break in across this nation, and to bring healing and to bring hope and to bring people to him. That's what I would say. And I would say to those who are fearful, that's natural and normal, and everyone feels fear. But I would say what my situation has shown me is that God is totally in control. 3 days ago, like I said to you, I thought we were coming out, the three of us were coming out in body bags. As of today, I am on the mend. Kieran, his symptoms have gone, and Miriam, my little girl, is fine. He is a complete redeemer. He's a miracle maker, and he's a healer. And that's what we've got to remember.